Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Football.
Judd, we made it. We made it out of the preseason, and we have now entered the regular season here. We have to wait like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But we have emerged from preseason football. How does it feel?
Oh, it feels fantastic. You know, it's funny. When training camp starts, you're like so ready to just watch football practice. You're just happy football's back. Yeah. And then right around the time you get the first preseason game, you're like, God, thank God it's finally a game. And by now you're like, I got to see a real game. So it's sort of like an addiction pattern moving down the road of football addiction. And by now you're like, I got to see a game. Give me Tampa Bay. Give me Baker Mayfield. Feels good.
And of course we're the idiots who we signed off on so every year Hubbard Radio and Hubbard TV are all under the same roof, and we are kind of the little like digital startup engine that could off to the side. But every year there's a big Carousel Park stage show or like blocks of time where, you know, hey, can Score North go out there? Can Purple Daily go out there for an hour and hang out with people? And I don't know. We just didn't think about there being a Saturday noon preseason. Usually the games are at night, unless it's a Sunday. Yeah. So we're the idiots that were out there. And thank you to everyone who showed up. We didn't like promote it a whole lot, but a bunch of you guys showed up and hung out with us for an hour while we told stories and interacted with the audience. But it was during the game. So you and I were like on your phone we did see the Jaren Hall touchdown drives just on your phone kind of in the backstage area and then watch the game later. But yeah, we're just like, this is the #1 Vikings podcast in America, and we're so smart that we're doing a live podcast during the third preseason game.
It was fun, though, and folks, to your point, showed up, and it was awesome. So, yes, thank you. Thank you for ignoring the Vikings to watch a Vikings show. I hope you did not all do what we did, which is go home then and watch the entire game. But I felt an obligation. Judd's camp notes would have felt it was cheating the customers if he had suddenly not watched a full preseason game.
Yeah, Judd's camp notes can't turn out to be a fraud, coming around the home stretch. So this is just going to be a little Sunday check down episode. We're going to hit you 15, 20 minutes here. There's one major topic that we'll get into, but a shout out to our friends at TCL, which has award-winning TVs for any budget, any space, all with stunning picture quality. And TCL makes more than just TVs too. They offer mobile products, audio devices, and home appliances. TCL brings you joy and simplicity through innovative technology. Learn more at TCL.com. So Jaren Hall winds up finishing pretty strong here. The Vikings, I guess the real headline, if you want, is the Vikings still haven't won a preseason game, if you care about that. It's been 4 years. They go 0-3 again. They couldn't score a point in the second half. So I guess if you care about that, then that happened.
So I think they are thrilled, though. So, and here's why. The 4 joint practices and then the preseason games being played exactly how they want them played with like the backups and stuff. I actually think I think O'Connell's handling of the preseason is just perfect.
So you don't think he's a little annoyed that they had a 17-3 lead and they could have gotten a preseason win?
Maybe a little annoyed, but he could have prevented that if he had wanted to. But he needs to see guys play, and plus the joint practices. Put
Kirk in the fourth quarter.
Well, do you remember? If you recall, when they did 4 preseason games and joint practices were not the norm. Do you remember like and I bought into this too, so I'm just as guilty. But do you recall like the amount of panic, like when Kirk's series didn't go well, or if Kirk played, and it's like, he got to get ready for a season now. I love this new thing of just let's slow cook the entire thing. Let's look at who we have to look at, and let's use those 3 games as basically they are games now used where you are like situationally, the only thing you can't control is the situational football, but everything else you control, who plays, when they play, and no starters get near the field. I actually think that this is perfection for what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like obviously if they really wanted to prevent that loss yesterday, they would have just put better players in, and they could have put better players in the fourth quarter or something.
They could have put those guys who started back in.
Yeah. So I guess my main takeaway from yesterday is, so Jaren Hall got a chance to play with the actual backups largely in the first half.
Yep.
As opposed to, the largely now the backups and the third string sometimes kind of blend together because the rosters aren't deep enough to have Well, I guess when there's 90, they are deep enough mathematically to have 3 full strings of players. But he played really well in the first half. Is it fair to say, I'm just going, like Kevin Seifert had a nice little summation of the Trey Lance flirtation. Ian Rappaport was floating some stuff. We know that the Vikings, based on credible reports, were talking with the Niners even during like March and April before the draft about Trey Lance. He winds up going for a 4th-round pick to Dallas. And Kevin Seifert said the Vikings were not in at the end on the Trey Lance talks. They might have been a consideration before the draft, or he might have been before the draft, but they are invested now in 5th-round pick Jaren Hall. Kevin O'Connell said today on Hall after the 3rd preseason game, quote, "I would definitely like to keep him around," referred to just how happy he was with Hall's retention of the offense, understands where the opportunities are for him, and really hopes that they can keep developing him. Is it fair to say that the Vikings, at the end of the day, like if they really wanted Trey Lance, they could have said, all right, let's do a 3rd-round pick, right? Let's do a something better than what Dallas offered.
Yes.
They chose, it sounds like, Jaren Hall over Trey Lance.
And I think that makes sense in O'Connell's world because he has now put, a lot of time and effort into Jaren Hall, who, by the way, going back to the comment when I asked O'Connell about it last week about the strategy of keeping 3 QBs now, because the 3rd guy does not go against he has to be on the 53 in the cuts. But then on game day, he's not going to count against your roster, but he can play if guys get hurt. And before you say, well, that's not going to take place, that's basically the whole rule is the Niners rule in their playoff game at Philadelphia, where they lost their first 2 quarterbacks and were, essentially screwed. So that rule was put in for a reason. O'Connell's a quarterback. And the other thing, too, that makes sense about this, Phil, and this is, by the way, I thought Jaren Hall showed some things. I thought he did, like we saw him play. I thought he showed some things. That being said, just to be very clear from my standpoint, I am not guaranteeing oh my God, he's going to be great. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But you know what this is? This is sort of, and of course, because of backup QBs in this town and the most recent coach, it's sort of a PTSD situation. But this is how you try to develop a quarterback. Like this is what you do. You for lack of a better term, like a plant, like a young plant, you water them and you spend time with them and you don't put them as the marquee plant in your home. Like they're not front and center, but you cultivate them. And I think what we're seeing now, and this again, I think is a big part of the reason that Kevin O'Connell was hired, is you can see the cultivation of Jaren Hall. You don't put him down. You don't yank him out if he makes a really boneheaded play. You bring him along, and that's going to give you the chance to find out. So it does make sense that if they've decided, hey, we invested a 5th-round pick, in particular, our head coach said draft this kid, which he clearly did. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense, too, that they're now going to put an investment. So before we all say, oh, Jaren Hall's a 5th-round pick, he got no chance. Kellen Mond couldn't, as a 3rd-round pick. Before we say that, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that the situation is very different. And I think what we have seen is really the start of a new era in Vikings football where they are going to put in a lot of time and effort into trying to develop a guy like Jaren Hall.
Yeah, and on the Trey Lance front, just to put a bow on it, he's not a ready-made, even though he's been in the league for 2 years with the injuries and just with the lack of playing time and throws, he's also still a project. So while I would have given up a 4th-round pick to have Trey Lance on the roster, and I would have just sort of had to figure out, okay, can I put Jaren Hall on the practice squad? Does he get claimed by another team? I am still interested in what Trey Lance could be. I understand it may not seem like much to fans that the draft happened in May. It's not that long ago. It's like 5 months ago, but that's a May to the end of August in terms of football development is a lifetime. Because all the mini camps, OTAs, the entire summer of playbook retention and everything that you're building in the summertime stacks up. You bring Trey Lance in, and he's you'd stash him away. And you would do what you can behind the scenes, but once the regular season hits, especially look at like the first few weeks of the season. Okay, well, we're all in with the first team offense and Kirk preparing. We have to win that home game against the Buccaneers because the schedule gets really weird. And then it's a quick turnaround, Philadelphia, right? the time to develop Trey Lance would have been trading for him in March, get him in the door, May, June, OTAs, mini camps, full summer of playbook retention, everything. They might just feel like, hey, if the price tag was going to outbid the other teams, maybe it had to be a 3rd-round pick.
I'm not doing that, by the way. Like, I was a 5th or 6th round guy. So when Dallas stepped up with the 4th, and the other thing too is I believe that Dallas is now taking on all of Lance's contract. I think there were teams that definitely told the Niners, okay, if we're going to give you a 4th-round pick, you're keeping some of that. So like the Vikings, we have to be aware of the fact, and I don't think there's a financial problem here, but Kwesi's operating is so far much more fiscally responsible in some ways, I think, than Rick did. Like
he hasn't handed out a contract yet, so
but there's some type of end game here we don't know yet or don't see. So my guess is that at the very least, when they talked in the spring, that the Vikings said, okay, we're interested in Trey Lance. 1, we're not going to obviously give up a ton for him, but 2, you're going to have to San Francisco keep some of his salary. And I think Dallas said, that's fine. We'll take on the entire thing. So like, I could see a lot of potential deal breakers here as well for we took Jaren Hall, to your point, we developed him, or we're working on that. And also from a Trey Lance standpoint, we don't want that entire cap hit on us.
I'll ask you this question too. Do you feel like to this point in Kirk Cousins' Vikings career, there's never really been an actual heir to the throne? They've drafted Kellen Mond, and that turned out to not be, anywhere near a viable, competitive backup. Sean Mannion was one of the worst backup quarterbacks in the league for years.
Trevor Siemian.
Now Nick Mullins is a good backup, but he's no threat to
he's a backup,
be a franchise quarterback or a starter. And now Jaren Hall, it's a nice little flyer in the 5th round. He's got some interesting tools. Seems like a mature, smart guy, but he's a multi-year project, right? Do you think there is any sort of Kirk Cousins angle here if it's one thing to have Jaren Hall learning and developing, it's another thing to trade for a former top 3 pick who's 6'4", toolsy, all these things?
Well, if that's the case, then I would think that they have every intention of trying to bring Kirk back. But if they had every intention of trying to bring Kirk back, why didn't they sign him to a 3-year extension in March? And at some point in time, but you're right. Like I call them Kirk's caddies, because Kirk's had caddies. Like these guys are pulling the golf bag. Hey, you want a 7? You want a 7-iron here, Kirk? So you're absolutely correct. I guess if they were afraid at all to have a real backup to Kirk, or to have a threat to Kirk, not even like a real backup, my question would be, that means you're going to keep him. And if you're going to keep him, why didn't you try and extend him in March? So that's confusing to me. I don't know. I still have no clue. And we certainly on this show have not shut the book on Kirk staying here for, 2024, 25, 26. But all of that being said, I don't know what their intention is.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows? It still wouldn't shock me if like a couple days before the season, they came to some sort of like 2-year agreement. It would not surprise me at all if they've loved everything they've seen from him in the offseason. He seems to be, look at even like the number 66 jersey stuff, the handlebar mustache stuff. Like he's so much more of a, I guess I'll just say, culture leader than he was 3 or 4 years ago. And
yeah, he clearly has been told to, and he's done it. He's embraced himself. He is now Kirk Cousins, sort of funny, slightly uncomfortable, geeky, sort of like me in some ways. But he definitely has embraced this thing. And you know what? Good for O'Connell. But it's just the contract thing remains weird. And I would agree with you completely that it wouldn't be surprising a couple days before the season to get something done if there weren't more pressing contract issues.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point again, and I know it doesn't have to be right this second, Justin Jefferson is going to have to get done. And I sort of guess that unless Kirk took a almost below market deal, I think Jefferson's the linchpin here, because you sort of need to know what his contract looks like before you go hog wild on Kirk. The Hawkinson thing I don't get completely in and of itself. But yeah, there's just, Kwesi's got a lot here that I feel is probably, because it's not as fun to talk about, not being focused on enough just from a contract standpoint and who they're going to pay and when they're going to pay them.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see. This is a good window now for the next 2 weeks where this is a time where contracts sometimes get done. So we'll see what happens with Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. It's my, oh man, now it's my elbow hurts. I'm not
He's
sure
going through that song. The leg bone's connected to the hip bone. What's next?
The contract
knee bone's
bone
connected to the thigh bone. It's my thigh. It's my contract bone.
$42 million guaranteed. I feel great.
My wallet. My back hurts because my wallet's so light. I need something.
Give us a couple other just things that stood out to you in that third preseason game, and then I have a fun little quiz for you, and then we'll say goodbye on this checkdown episode. What are a couple things that stood out to you yesterday?
A couple things that stood out to me are who played and who did not play. Now, I saw, if I can find this here quickly, Seifert had a tweet about the Vikings sat 45 players yesterday. Last week in the game against the Titans, it was 38, and in week 1 of the preseason against Seattle, it was 26. But let's start with who did play, which leads me to believe that he is in trouble despite a pretty solid camp. Jalen Reagor played. Jalen Naylor, coming back from injury, did not. O'Connell loves Naylor. I think Naylor has the roster made now that he's back. Wongwu's a big question here. I'm not going to be surprised if he gets cut because he has not done anything. And I don't think they're particularly pleased about that. But the fact that Reagor played, and when you look at who played and who didn't play, and there were some guys banged up that O'Connell talked about, including backup quarterback Joanne Williams, who he wanted to play but couldn't. But that one stood out to me. It also stood out, and this is a good thing, Ivan Pace Jr. did not play. Like, he's just locked in now. He is just locked in.
How about that? Undrafted free agent rookie, dude.
Say. That's exactly what I was. I mean, a guy that comes in undrafted. How many times have you seen in a rookie year a UDFA kid impress them so much that by the last game they're like, "We're good." That really stood out to me.
Never. Yeah, it's rare. Usually you get like maybe one UDFA that makes the team, or maybe a couple. There's some franchises that I'm sure several do because their rosters are so depleted. But for him to not only make the team, but to make it so ironclad that he doesn't have to play in the last preseason game is pretty incredible.
I've been saying along in my roster projections, and we'll do 4.0 on Monday. I've been saying all along that Dwayne McBride looks like a practice squad guy. 7th round pick. I think there's some things he does not get. But because of the whole Wongwu thing, do you think McBride makes it instead of like and it might be a holding place for a veteran that they're going to sign? Yeah. But I wonder if he's going to at least make the initial 53, because I think you're going to keep at least 3 running backs. And I just don't know that Kane is that guy now. I mean, he literally has disappeared.
It would be between, in terms of guys that are currently on the 90-man camp roster, if Wongu's not a part of the equation, then it would have to be either Dwayne McBride or probably Abram Smith. He's the dude who tore up the XFL. I think he led the XFL in rushing for the DC Defenders. But there are some other guys sitting out there. I mean, Kareem Hunt is still sitting out there. Could they have seen such a lack of depth, and maybe they're so disappointed with Dwayne McBride, and because they Kwesi said they had a starter grade on him, not meaning like week 1 of his first season, right, but that they probably thought he was further along than he really is. He also had it's a small sample size, but he had a 17 pass protection grade out of 100 according to Pro Football Focus in the small handful of opportunities he got. Some of this is, hey, if you have to be out there on a passing down, can you pick up your guy without getting confused and putting your quarterback in a bad spot? And I feel like that's a question with most of these young running backs right now. So I guess if there was any thought that they might sign another veteran running back still on the market, that thought is stronger after watching these 3 preseason games.
Oh, 1,000%. And I think what they would do is, I think that you would keep that when you make the cuts on Tuesday to get down to 53, I think you would keep a McBride or a Smith, to your point, and then replace that player. because I ultimately don't think McBride would get claimed, and I still think that he is a long shot. I'm just saying the Wongwu thing has gone from where I thought he was a roster lock when training camp started to I don't know now. But yes, and I also wonder if they would try to, and this might be depending on the urgency of teams around the league, Phil, I wonder if they would try to get through the first week without said veteran back and then sign him, because again, if you sign the guy after week 1, it's his salary's not guaranteed, which makes sense of why you do that. But I got to think that there is at least depth concern right now at that spot. And we all expect that Alexander Madison's going to be fine, but he's new at this part. So like, it's not like, he's been doing this for 5 years. So I just think of all the positions, I think that one is probably like a depth of, we need to do something else.
Yeah. Well, Alex Madison also is averaging fewer than 4 yards per carry the last 2 seasons. And I like Madison, but where you're taking a guy that's under 4 yards a carry in a backup role and moving him into a starting role. It's a question.
Yeah, I know it is. It's a big question.
I've got the 7 highest graded preseason offensive players for you here. I'm going to read through these according to Pro Football Focus. These are guys with who played at least 10 snaps.
Okay.
Jordan Addison was the highest graded preseason player for the Vikings. Tight end Colin Thompson was second. Josh Oliver, the tight end, the run blocking tight end, he'll be a starter in 12 personnel. Ty Chandler 4, Austin Schlottman 5, Vidarian Lowe, the backup tackle, he actually I think played the second most snaps of anyone. He was the 6th highest grade, and then Jalen Reagor was the 7th highest graded offensive player.
He looked good in the games.
On the defensive side, let's give you the 7 highest ranked players here. Sheldon Day, 97 snaps for Sheldon Day. He was the interior defensive lineman.
He was good yesterday too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a sack this preseason. He had 6 pressures, so pretty nice little preseason run for him. Jay Ward was the 2nd highest graded player.
Big
hybrid defensive back. Yep.
Forced the fumble. Yep.
Edge rusher Curtis Weaver was 3rd. Linebacker Tanner Vallejo was 4th, followed by Jawan Williams, the cornerback, Caleb Evans, and then I might be going one too far down. Theo Jackson was 7th.
Yeah.
The guy Theo Jackson, the safety. So those are your top performers in the preseason. This is for the whole preseason, according to Pro Football Focus. Interesting.
I wonder if they're going to, when you read that Jalen Reagor grade, I wonder if they're going to try to trade him Tuesday. Because like they played him in this third game, which they didn't play a ton of guys in. So they clearly had a purpose. And, it's not to punish him. I wonder if it was to get more put on film, as the football folks like to say, to try to get a draft pick for him.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to. The number crunch game is going to be really interesting. I just saw something else on the defensive side. Ivan Pace was the 3rd lowest graded defensive player according to Pro Football Focus, but it's weird. So he was very highly graded as a tackler and as a pass rusher coming forward. He was dinged quite a bit in coverage and sort of like where he's supposed to be in the run defense game.
Yes, that's
which I think matches the eye test, right?
That's what I talked about after the Titans game. From the press box, you could see the problems. His pursuit is awesome. Like, he is an Energizer bunny.
Yeah.
But because of his size, if he's in the wrong place in the run game, it's hard. It can be hard for him to get around certain guys. And now he is sealed off from the play.
Mm.
So that's interesting. That makes perfect sense. They're going to need to be careful there. He's going to be, there are certain situations in which I think he's going to be super effective. And there's going to be certain situations where they probably need to be careful about who's on the field when.
Yep. So there it is. He's an undrafted rookie free agent for a reason. It's not like, oh my God, he should have been a first round pick and he fell into the Vikings last. He's got flaws. That's why he wasn't drafted.
It looks like it paid off though, which is good. That's for a guy who dropped through the draft to impress the coaching staff enough to sit him out for the third preseason game, that's pretty damn good. So good for him.
Yes. Another thing that's pretty damn good is our friends at NeutrSource.
Oh, yeah.
NeutrSource chicken and rice is the go-to food. So Maya Mackey tricked me yesterday.
Of course you did.
Sometimes if you don't communicate, I forgot that I fed her lunch. So really it was my fault. But then a couple hours before her dinner slot, she was looking at me like, oh, I'm so hungry. Oh, I didn't get lunch. So Maya actually got an extra half scoop of NeutrSource chicken and rice yesterday, Judd.
That, my good man, that is a Stella trick. That is a dog trick from way back when. They know that we're dumb and they know that we forget things and feel bad. And so, yes. So then they're like, I haven't eaten. And when it's NeutrSource, it's like, yeah, it's on. More NeutrSource. Thanks a lot, Pops. You got to learn, man. You got to have some sort of like marker for when you've fed them less, because they will take advantage each time. But good for Maya, an opportunist. And you know what? Just proving again, NeutrSource is a puppy favorite.
Yes. NeutrSourcePetFoods.com to find a NeutrSource retailer in your neck of the woods. You can find them all over the country. So check them out, NeutrSourcePetFoods.com. All right. Any final thoughts here before we say goodbye on this night? We're going to have Judd's final 53 projection on Monday.
Yep.
We're going to have we will lay out the fall Purple Daily schedule for you this week too. We've got all sorts of fun things. I mean, you've already heard, Purple Daily on draft now with Tyler Fornes and Miles Gorham and Declan. Before I Die with you and Jesse Pierce and Ross Brendel. Those are back in the mix. Our guy Alex Boone is coming back for some film reviews, and he's going to join the full crew. We're just trying to lock down the final pieces of the schedule, but we'll unveil kind of our full season-long Purple Daily schedule. We're going to add another live stream early in the week, likely Mondays. But any final preseason thoughts before we say goodbye and then do the 53 tomorrow?
I would guess the roster cuts might start to, at least some of them, leak out today and certainly tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be there. They're not going to inform the guys who are being cut all on Tuesday. Hey, you're cut
One
now.
Zoom call. Get everyone on two Zoom calls.
All on a Zoom call. You know how we talk about this being a rough day? It ain't a rough day at all. You're cut. So anyway, I would guess that those that information is going to start to leak out Sunday, and if not Sunday, for sure on Monday. But you know what? I think as far as things go, this has been and remains to me such an interesting team and season, because there's been enough change now. Like a year ago, I was sort of confused as to the stand pat nature of things, but you sort of knew who was going to play, right? You sort of did. I think that there is, and especially now with Flores, who quite frankly, I thought showed more of his blitz packages in the preseason than I expected, which speaks to what's coming. Mm-hmm. I think that this is among the most intriguing seasons in recent times, as far as, not that it's going to be great, not that it's going to be bad, but there's a lot of unknown. There is a lot of unknowns here, and those are going to continue to grow when it comes to contracts, when it comes to roster construction. But this really feels like O'Connell, and obviously to a certain degree Kwesi, this is the first team that they're really putting their stamp on. And I would not say that last year they put their stamp on it. I think that they did a good job of guiding it.
Yeah. Yeah. The variance of sort of what could happen. I think when you do have Kirk Cousins as your quarterback, historically, you're going to be a good, solid team at worst. So they do have that. But yeah, who knows? And I would say another good thing is that as different as the defense is going to look, it can't get a whole lot worse than it was last year. So I think the only way is up, even if they have some train wrecks here and there where they get too aggressive and they get burned over the top, and some of these inexperienced young players, maybe aren't what we thought. The good news is it can't add up to being much worse than what we saw last year. So we'll see it. It feels like the win total for a bunch of reasons is going to come down, but it feels like the quality of what you're seeing could actually go up. So we'll see what that manifests as in terms of a win-loss total. But
yeah, I think you're right. I think the defense. I think that what's going to be interesting about this is when they get burned now, it's going to be more spectacular. With Donatel, it's like, what are you doing, man? Too high shell, and that don't work. You're an idiot. This one's going to be, did you see all those guys that they sent on the blitz? And so didn't hold up on the back end or something. So I do think that there's going to be more of a, well, at least they had the right idea. I don't think last year I said that they had the right idea on defense once.
It didn't seem like they
I was
did.
always what are you doing?
It was, although maybe the idea last year was, hey, if we're going to give up a touchdown drive, let's make it death by paper cut so that the offense can get a breather. Maybe that was the strategy. This year, the offense is going to be like, oh God, we got to go back out there, 48-yard touchdown. Anyhow, all right. Thanks for hanging out with us here on this preseason recap episode on a Sunday. We're going to hit you with Judd's final 53-man roster projection tomorrow on Purple Daily. And if you could click the subscribe button and the like button on our YouTube channel, you can help us grow this thing and spread the word. And the same is true on Spotify and Apple. A 5-star rating and a positive review both go a long way to helping us chart higher and just spread the awareness. Daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.